We're going to start off, remember we're still kind of in this chapter 2, so talking about leadership, what theory? Trait theory, all right? And I'm going to try to avoid saying some things since we still have a person taking the test, so I don't want to give answers away. But we talked a little bit on Tuesday about what kind of model that fits into trait theory. The big 5, right? And we talked about what those 5 things are. Okay. So, do y'all remember the acronym to remember those 5 personality traits? OCEAN. All right. And so, what does that stand for? Openness. C is E is extroversion. A is agreeableness. And N is or, if you want to be nice, negative behavior. Either way. So, yeah. So, this was all about that, going along with the idea of trait theory, that traits, do they change or are they pretty stable? Pretty stable. So, along a lifetime, you may kind of go up and down, see some growth in different areas, but we kind of say traits are constant throughout a lifetime. And so with that, this is kind of saying, all right, so people's personalities then. So these are 5 traits that are common among people's personalities, and you're kind of on a scale in a certain area. So we ended Tuesday saying that, all right, there's another way that we can look at some of these personality traits, especially things like negative behavior, neuroticism, your agreeableness, your openness. And we call it, and psychology kind of calls it, emotional intelligence. So pull out your test. This one didn't give you an immediate way to score. So y'all didn't come to class with a score. So we're going to score it now. All right. So question number 1. You're on an airplane that's set, and if you haven't taken it, if you didn't bring it with you, get out a blank sheet of paper and write down what your, kind of as I'm going through, what your answers would be, okay? You're on an airplane that suddenly hits extremely bad turbulence and begins rocking from side to side. What do? A, continue to read a book or magazine, watch a movie, you try to pay little attention to the turbulence. B, become vigilant for an emergency, carefully monitoring the stewardess and reading the emergency instruction cards. C, a little of A and B. D, you're not sure, you never really notice that there's turbulence. Okay, everybody got their answer? If you answered A, B, or C, give yourself 10 points. So put a 10 beside it. If you answered D, put 0. Okay. Question 2. You're in a meeting when a colleague takes credit for your work that you have done. What do? A, immediately and publicly confront the colleague over the ownership of your work. B, after the meeting, take the colleague aside and tell them that you would appreciate in the future that they credit you in speaking about your work. C, nothing. It's not a good idea to embarrass colleagues in public. D, after the colleague speaks, thank them for referencing your work and give the group more specific detail about what you're trying to accomplish. If you answered B, give yourself 5 points. If you answered D, as in dog, give yourself 10 points. If you answered A or C, 0 points. Okay. Question 3. Does anybody need me to be reading these out loud, or do y'all just want the scoring? Everybody got their answers to everything? Okay. Awesome. So 3. For number 3, if you answered B, give yourself 5 points. If you answered D, give yourself 10 points. A or C, 0. Question 4. If you answered A, give yourself 10 points. If you answered C, give yourself 5. Question 5. If you answered C, give yourself 10 points. If you answered B or D, give yourself 5 points. Question 6. B, 10 points. C, 5 points. Question 7. C, 5 points. D, 10 points. Question 8. A, 10 points. Question 9.
Wait, we say
A, 8. If you answered A, 10 points. Anything else, 0 points. Question 9. B, 10 points. D, 5 points. Question 10. B, 5 points. D, 10 points. So see how many points you have and put that total at the top. Now, y'all don't have to say your name and what your score is, but start kind of popcorning out to me what your scores were.
90.
So we got a 90, 50, 20,
60.
65,
75.
okay,
70. 55.
80.
85.
80. 60.
65. 70. 65.
55.
I heard a 55 and an 80.
50.
Anybody else? I don't think that's any more totals. I'm an 80. I'll add myself in there. So, just based off of the questions, what do y'all think this means?
It's like a problem solving ability, not exactly in a workforce, but in a leadership position.
Okay, I kind of like that. So you think it has to do with problem solving.
I think it also means how you handle people's, or how you react to people's emotions in different situations that could be helpful.
Okay. So you think there is that idea of emotion and tied to it and your reaction. So before we really dive into what emotional intelligence is, just kind of based off of how you answered those questions, how would you describe your emotions and your reactions to emotions?
I'm not very emotional.
You're not very emotional. Why do you say that?
I don't know. Whenever people get I don't know. I don't really have much sympathy or empathy for people. I'm just like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I weren't like that so much, but
It's just who you are, right? What else?
I feel like I understand how people feel, and I'm like, okay, well, if I said this or did this, would it make me mad? And then I kind of just evaluate it from there, and then know that they're a different person, so maybe they need something different.
Okay. Is understanding emotions always having a reaction? Maybe it's knowing when not to have reactions, right? So all of it, that's kind of where that idea of emotional intelligence comes in. And we're going to talk about that. We're not going to turn your homework in yet because I want you to we may refer back to some of the questions on there to really hit some of these points about it. But you should have read a little bit about it in Chapter 2. Can anyone kind of tell me some of the things you remember reading about emotional intelligence? What do y'all remember reading about it?
that leaders who are more sensitive to their emotions typically can be better leaders because they know how to handle the situation.
Absolutely. So leaders who are more sensitive to their emotions can be more sensitive to other people's emotions. What else do y'all remember? Anybody remember somebody's name that was mentioned as kind of like one of the key people to know with emotional intelligence? Goleman is his name. So if you find this stuff interesting, he has some cool books to read, and they're not like super scholarly, like way above your head written. Like they're really interesting, and a lot of people actually just like they kind of, I don't want to say they fall in line with self-help because they're based on research, but a lot of people find them pretty interesting. But this whole premise, this idea of emotional intelligence and why we talk about it in leadership theory is that we are finding that there's a connection between it and people's personality. So it would fall in line with trait theory, right? If we're describing people's personality. And it's the ability to perceive and apply emotions to life's tasks, to reason and understand emotions, express emotions, use emotions to facilitate thinking, manage emotions with yourself and with others in relationships. Again, just like Catherine said, if you're more sensitive to your emotions, you'll understand their impact on other people, which will make you a more effective leader. That's what, and again, cool thing. We don't have a bunch of citations by that definition or that premise, but research has shown that. When we've looked at, okay, let's look at someone's emotional intelligence score, and then let's ask the people that work for them or that are in their group that they lead to rate their effectiveness. The higher emotional intelligence score that someone has, the more effective they're perceived by others as a leader. Why do y'all think that might be?
People like to be understood.
People like to be understood. Relationships, right? It's that reciprocalness. It's kind of hard to build respect. How do y'all think emotional intelligence plays in power, your ability to influence? If you don't understand people's emotions, what power base might you not have?
You might not have that reference.
The referent power. What power base might you tend to use more often if you have low emotional intelligence? Maybe coercive, right? So think about that. This all connects to each other. It's kind of cool. And so that's really why we spend some time in this class talking about it, because it just helps us understand our personalities a little bit better, the personalities of other people as well. Again, Goleman, kind of that guy in the middle, he's the one that really has this idea of personal and social competencies. And that's what we're going to kind of focus on for a little bit, talking about, is that there's 5 main competencies. And I put this on Brightspace for y'all. It's like a one-pager that you can print off if you want it. But essentially, 3 of them are personal competencies, 2 are social competencies. So what do y'all think the personal competencies are?
Self-awareness, self-regulation.
Thank you for reading, guys. Yes, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation. And yeah, I've got the definition up there for you, but I need to hear it in your own words, what you think it means. So understanding, obviously, you got to understand your own emotions before you can understand other people. So you've got to have a certain amount of personal competence. What is self-awareness?
It's being aware of like how you feel and how you like come off to other people.
Yeah.
It's like how you express yourself.
Yeah. Someone told me one time that I was abrasive. And while I may not personally think I am, do I like kind of check myself every once in a while to make sure I'm not coming off as abrasive? Yeah. It made me more self-aware. Like, obviously, even if it's like 1% in a million that thought I was abrasive, that's their reality. That's their truth, right? And I must have done something that made them feel that way, so I shouldn't just disregard it. I need to be self-aware enough that, hey, some things I do, other people don't like. And I need to pay attention to that if I want to be effective. What is self-regulation? So what's the difference between self-awareness and self-regulation? Controlling it. Explain more.
So your self-awareness, I don't know, I see like looking at the definition, the two differences is knowing and then managing.
So one's knowing
Yeah.
and one's managing. I would say one's knowing about it and one's doing something about it, right? So what's an example y'all could think of where someone may be self-aware but not self-regulating when it comes to emotions?
Using their abrasive example,
Okay.
like you know you're abrasive, but you don't watch what you say to make sure you're not like offending anyone.
Right. So how many people have a friend that's like, I'm outspoken. I just say whatever's on my mind and I don't care what people think. Anybody have a friend? Or maybe you're the friend. Okay. Is that always good in all situations? Does your friend or do you know when that's appropriate and not?
Usually not.
Usually not. So your example you're thinking of, usually not. So would you say they're high or low on that scale of self-regulation?
Very, very low.
Very, very low. What would be another one? Can y'all think of another? Okay, here's a good example. I told y'all I'd talk about my kid a lot, but I feel like sometimes an almost 3-year-old is like a great example for a lot of this stuff because he doesn't know he's doing it. But okay, he's reached this point right now where he has self-awareness. All right, Wilkinson knows things that he prefers, and he has these kind of intuitions of what he likes, right? He prefers this morning, like, he knows, we're trying to potty train, right? He knows that it's preferred that he goes in the potty. We've been working on it for a month now. But as far as managing his impulse, what to do? Mom, I need to go play outside. And then I find him in the corner of the backyard pooping. Not in the potty, right? Okay? Like, that's legit my experience this morning. Okay? And I'm just like, how long is this going to take, right? Now, psychologically, he doesn't quite have the mental capacity yet as a 2.5-year-old to really have self-regulation. But do 18-year-olds? At what age do you think that people really are able to self-regulate? When does this happen? What do y'all think? 10? All right, why?
Well, like, I don't know, like, in certain situations, like, you can only be, like, so professional, like, and I know, like, you grow up a lot within, like, junior high, college age, but that's only, like 6 years or 8 years or whatever it is, or, like, graduating high school and then, like, going into college, like, there's a lot of difference, and there's a lot of, like, differences in how you manage yourself, because, like, I know in high school that I managed, like, my self-awareness a lot different than I do now.
Yeah. So it takes some experience, right? Kind of that refining. What were you going to say, Jonathan? You were kind of...
I just said 10.
10? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty young that self-regulation happens, but it is something that has to be, I don't kind of say conditioned, but encouraged and promoted. So how do people get to be 50 years old and not have self-regulation? Didn't have a mama who told them to be quiet. Yeah.
Or like they were, maybe the thing that they should have been self-regulating was like how outspoken they were, and since they never did, no one had the guts to like make them act that way, so they just still behave in that sense.
A lot of times if you find older people maybe that lack self-regulation, they probably also lack some self-awareness too, would you say? So which do you think is more important, self-awareness or self-regulation?
Probably the first.
I would say it's stepwise. You've got to have self-awareness before you can have self-regulation. But kind of going back to what Lexi said, we can talk about it, but you got to do something, right? And so I can give y'all all of the leadership inventories and assessments and personality exams, and you can just know yourself so well. But if you aren't making some changes and regulating some of your emotional behavior, doesn't really matter, does it? And so another personal confidence, how you manage yourself, is this idea of motivation. So it's these tendencies, how you let your emotions affect whether you accomplish goals or not. Why do y'all think that's an important competency to look at in someone's personality?
I think it goes back to like, do they give up easily? Do they try to persevere through?
Yeah. So I'm going to use the word resiliency. So we talked about that go back to our leadership definitions. Y'all didn't like that word struggle. And I said, well, maybe if we use the word resilient, like we want leaders and followers to be resilient. Like when they face hard times, we want them to have the ability to bounce back from it. As a whole, what would you say our generation, because I'm part of y'all's generation, our resiliency score is? Do you think we do really good with resiliency, or do we think we struggle with resiliency?
Probably struggle.
Huh?
Probably struggle.
Probably struggle, a C-. Why? Kind of talk me through it.
So I don't know, and I think it, especially for like maybe a lot of us in like this course in this room, because we come from a usually more rural agricultural background, that definitely gives us a leg up some other backgrounds. But at the same time, though, I know personally that I don't want to do it sometimes. I'm done with it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you kind of get to the point you don't want to deal with it. But I know that like my dad and my grandpa, they'll get it done, and then they'll complain about it later, but they'll get done 100% all the time, and that's so I don't know. Maybe that's what it is, but I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah. Why do you think we struggle with it, Gage?
I don't know, just kind of going off what he says, I see people give up too easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, it's usually not as hard as you're making it out to be.
What are you gonna ask?
I think it's more of like the way we were raised. Like, it's not the same as it used to be. Like my parents were raised in a completely different way than what I was, or what my little sister was, or it's just a different time.
So times are different. There probably are a lot of external factors that affect resiliency, but I think one of the big key things to think about with emotional intelligence is that these are competencies that you control. And there will be a point in this semester where we talk about this idea of locus of control. So can you control what's happening around you, or is someone else in control of it and there's nothing? And like people have different ways that they perceive their control. But all of these competencies, especially these personal competencies, are things that we say, you know what, like regardless of what's going on around you, you have the ability to choose how motivated or unmotivated you're going to be, how resilient or unresilient you're going to be. And so your emotions tie into that. When you face struggle or failure, do you tend to say, you know what, I'm done, wiping away, or do you say, what can I do different? Bring it on. Let's try something else and let me still get to where I'm going. So that's kind of what this piece is looking at, this personal confidence. And everybody's at a different point in that scale for a variety of different reasons. So emotional intelligence says, okay, if you can manage yourself well, if you can build upon these competencies, then you are able to understand your emotions better in order to understand other people's. But there still takes some other competencies there to be able to understand other people's, and it's these social competencies. So how you handle relationships. Empathy. Someone mentioned earlier, not very empathetic. Why do you think empathy is an important leadership trait or an emotional intelligence trait?
You're probably going to have followers that are emotional, and you're going to be able to deal with them.
How in the world are you even going to be able to identify the needs of others or like what you're trying to accomplish if you don't have empathy for other people, right? Looking back at the Big Five model, what personality trait do you think would be pretty connected with empathy?
Conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness. What else?
Probably openness.
Openness. Any others?
It could be agreeableness too.
Agreeableness, yeah. So kind of finding that common ground, right? So you can kind of see some overlap. It's kind of cool to see how these things build on each other. And then, of course, the social skills part. So what I like about emotional intelligence is that they don't call the trait extroversion. And the reason why I like that is that sometimes when we're given like a one or the other, you're either extroverted or introverted, what's the first thing we do? We place judgment, right? Like one has to be better than the other, right? Well, this isn't saying, okay, extroversion, it's what's needed. No, just social skills. So kind of going back to this idea of just how do we relate with people? So inducing desirable responses in others. What does that make y'all think of that we've talked about already in this class? Inducing desirable responses. What would be another way we could say that?
Influencing.
Influencing. Getting people to do what you want, which would be
Power.
power. Okay? So again, everything's building on each other. Okay? So our social skills. And I like the word adeptness. So like, okay, we know we have these power bases. We have these ways to influence people to get them to do what we want as leaders. But adeptness is knowing when to use them. What's appropriate to use. All right? So can y'all think, someone give me an example of maybe someone who has some of these personal competencies, and it does, you don't have to say names if you don't want to, just kind of give us the context of what they are, but maybe they're lacking some of these social competencies.
I have one. My mom deals like with depression, and so she's like dealing with a new job and a new apartment. So she like has aware that she is like upset, but she doesn't really do a good job of managing it.
I like that. Yeah. It's a struggle for anyone who deals with depression, anxiety. I deal with anxiety, and I know I have it. I know my triggers. And then before I know it, I'm having a panic attack and I've done something and haven't regulated it. Like it just happens. Like that's a struggle for me. What's another example?
I know a person who is a very good leader and everything is like very intelligent, and it's just like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. But when it comes to communicating it to others, they're really
Mm-hmm. I like that. I've known someone who is very, at least you would think that they would be very self-aware and be very self-regulated because they've had a lot of training and stuff, but they lack so much empathy that they have met with people who have walked out crying, and they have no idea that they've just upset a person. Y'all ever dealt with someone like that? So you never get an apology. They have no idea how their words and actions are affecting other people, but they just go on about their business, and it's kind of tough. So it's hard. It's like you look at them and you say, okay, yeah, they're a leader, but then you kind of start losing that referent power or that respect for them. So it's hard. So emotional intelligence. Do y'all think, which one do y'all like better? Do y'all like Big Five, or do you like this idea of emotional intelligence as personality traits better? What do y'all think is, I don't know, what do you think would be more important to someone as a leader?
I think that emotional competence is I like how it's kind of, there is a scale and stuff, but it's not like, oh well, you need more open mind or like less open. Like there's perks to both. So I think the way that is set up is better.
Okay, I like that.
I think our generation may not like that, like the ocean, there's agreeable, and like there's these scales of this one is like not positively correlated with leadership. Like where the emotional competence, you don't see that that negative correlation. Mm-hmm. You can be low on the scale and still be a good leader.
Yeah.
Where like if someone's very neurotic, they're gonna say, oh well, I'm not a good leader, especially in our generation.
So at the end of this assessment, y'all just got a total score, right? We didn't actually break down your score for self-awareness is this. Your score for self-regulation is this. But do you think y'all could probably go back through the questions and look at your answers and kind of see where you might be lower on some of these things? Like let's look at, I don't know, I like number 2, for instance. You're in a meeting, colleague takes credit for work that you've done, what do? How many of you answered A? You would immediately and publicly confront the colleague over the ownership of your work. Who said that? All right. How many of you said B? After the meeting, you take the colleague aside, tell them you appreciate in the future that they credit you when speaking about your work. All right? How many of you said C? Nothing. It's not a good idea to embarrass colleagues in public. All right? How many of you said D? After they speak, you thank them for referencing your work and give the group more specific details about what to accomplish. Okay? So D was 10 points. B was 5 points. So why do you think A, confronting the colleague, or C, not doing anything at all, why do you think those weren't emotionally intelligent responses?
You're probably thinking, if you do, well, it's hard because both of them have differences.
It's the extremes, right? Like,
So like the thought, like the first one, I feel like you're kind of making a fool of yourself, like unknowingly, because everyone's gonna be like, that was true. But
so what would you say that they probably lacked? And again, we're not making judgments, we're just
or self-regulation, really.
self-regulation.
Yeah. And then the other one is more like their social skills are very poor. They don't have the capacity to like go and speak to someone. Like, go, okay, goodbye.
Yeah. I would honestly say both of them would maybe show a lack of strength in social skills because neither are kind of appropriate responses for social settings, right? Like, it's not good to avoid conflict, but it's also not good to always be confrontational. But then we have for B, so if you said that you would take them aside and just say, hey, give me some credit in the future, you got 5 points for that. But then if you publicly thanked them and referenced your work, you got 10. So what would be the difference using some of these competencies? Why would D have a little bit more weight than B?
Because the leader's going to speak up, like when the time is, they're not going to point the side. Obviously, you're going to thank her because she is bringing her work to the light, but then again, that you still want to have, hey, that's mine. I did that work. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of appropriateness. I'm totally a D. I kind of think D is a little passive aggressive. I can kind of be that way sometimes. But yeah, it's knowing how to do things. I think in a what's the word I'm looking for? A tactful manner, right? Like you know how to be tactful. Let's look at.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on that one, it was saying that public confrontation would be a 0,
Mm-hmm.
but on 5, didn't the public confrontation and score the highest?
So that's actually the next one I was jumping to. Let's chat about that one. So 5 was, you're a manager in an organization that's trying to encourage respect for racial and ethnic diversity. You overhear someone telling a racist joke. What do you do? Who said A? Ignore it. Best way to deal with these things is not to react. Anybody say A? Okay. B, call the person into your office, explain their behavior is inappropriate and grounds for disciplinary action. Got some B's. C, speak up on the spot saying that such jokes are inappropriate and will not be tolerated in your organization. Okay. D, suggest to the person telling the joke he go through a diversity training program. If you haven't seen episode 2 of season 1 of The Office, you should probably watch that. So yeah, B and D were 5 points, C was 10 points. So C is up on the spot, saying it's why, going to Gage's question, why in this situation would you say yes? Being confrontational is the emotionally intelligent response to this versus 2, where someone's taking credit for your work.
I think for this is just because it's a touchy subject, and it's like, I think sometimes when you're in a workplace, you might not understand people's like feelings about a situation, but when making a racist joke, like, that can make somebody like really, really hurt inside. You know, that's also like a not okay thing to say in general, not even just at work. Like it's not really acceptable anywhere in your life, and I don't think it should be like, hey, don't say that here next time. It's like, hey, you need to rethink how you're going about this. Like,
what saying derogatory things about another person is very personal versus just like a product of something. I mean, we take what we do, our work personally, but it can be different. So what competency would y'all say here that by speaking up immediately, you're actually showing a high level of what? Empathy. So I would say that is like how much empathy and what type of empathy is required in that context or that situation is probably a good reason behind that. So it's a great question. Yeah, so that's just kind of one of those things that shouldn't be tolerated. It shouldn't happen. Were there any other questions that y'all look back at that you kind of want to chat about? Dig apart a little bit, y'all found interesting? Maybe even just the scenario that it put you in that you're like, that's a weird thing to ask.
So, can you explain, I didn't understand, like, what the turbulence in the plane really is.
So the turbulence in a plane, what do you do when emergency happens? All right, so great example. I just thought about this. All right, when I was in college, I was in my sophomore year, and Auburn was playing Mississippi State away ball game, and we decided we wanted to have friends over to watch the game. And a friend of mine came up from FSU. She was going to school in Tallahassee, so wanted her to have a fun weekend, right? And she makes like the best homemade hot wings ever. We fry them. She makes her own sauce for them, whatever. So we were going to make all this stuff. Well, it's the first time I'd really fried anything in this house that I was living in with my roommates. And I don't even remember now what oil I bought, but I didn't buy like normal vegetable oil to fry them. Don't ask me why. What is something, if you're frying food, you need to know about the oil that you choose to use? The temperature. Yeah, like at what point is it going to boil? Because different oil boils at a different temperature, right? Lord, wasn't thinking about that. So I just like put the pot of oil on to heat up, and I turn around, and when I tell y'all there is fire just whoosh, coming out, I mean like the house could have gone down in like 2 minutes. Like it was ginormous. What did I do? I just stood there and screamed. Like I just froze and I just went, ah! Luckily, my friend Jennifer has more emotional intelligence than I do, because she didn't say a word and she just came behind me and she got a cloth and she got some water and she took care of it. What would have happened if my friend Jennifer had not been there? The house would have burned down, because I don't know what I would have done. Like, I wasn't expecting it. It came out of nowhere. I still obviously have PTSD from it, right? Okay? That's turbulence. Like, emotional intelligence is how, I mean, your emotions aren't just like having empathy for others, being loving, understanding. Your emotions are your reactions to things, right? Like everything, anger, your ability, you know, that fight or flight kind of thing. And so like how you react to situations is all part of your emotions. And so that's kind of what it's looking at. Like if you're in a chaotic or emergency situation, how do you choose to react? How many of y'all would have probably just screamed at the fire like me? Please don't let me be the only one. Thank you.
I watched someone break into our car one time and I didn't know what to do, and I just stood there and he just drove away.
Yeah. Just take it all. Took out my whole car.
He told me to call the cops. I called the cops, and then they got me in trouble because I called my mom first.
Yes. All right. How many of you say, like, you know what, when stuff hits the fan, I'm usually pretty calm and I handle things pretty diplomatically? All right. Kudos to y'all. Y'all are awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of all part of it, too. So kind of think about that, too. Like, the next time, like, something happens and you kind of get thrown for a loop, how do you react to it? That's usually a good sign to you about your emotional intelligence, your ability to handle stress. There is a counseling center on campus. Every student at OSU, as part of your tuition, you can get 10 free sessions. It is a way underutilized resource on campus, and so I tell y'all this and that, like, screw the stigma about it. Like, if there are some of these things that you're like, you know what, maybe I'm not as self-regulated as I should be, or maybe my empathy, I should work on that. Go chat with some professionals about it. Let them help you out with it. That's what they're here for. Overall, I think these two, like, even though these traits tie into effective leadership, I think it just makes you a stronger human being as well. So I'm all for, like, whatever you can do to help yourself be a better human being. Let's do it. I'm not going to go through each of these because we've kind of talked about it, but they'll be in the slides online for you at the end of this week. So what I want to talk about now are some of these like pros and cons of the trait approach. So I told y'all every time we finish talking about like an area of leadership theory, we're going to say, okay, there's some good things about it, there's some not so good things about it. Kind of overall again, trait approach is about who the leader is, right? What is kind of an underlying premise of trait theory? Something that you really, really need to remember about it. Do traits and personality change or not change? Overall, they don't change. Trait theory as a whole believes, so whether you believe it or not, this is what the theory says. Trait theory, so emotional intelligence, Big Five, any trait research you read is going to say, you may change from time to time, but if we were to look at you over a lifetime, your personality, your traits are pretty stable. They don't change. So that's very important to talk about and to remember. Remember, it focuses on the leader itself. So have we talked at all about followers? And like how they affect a leader?
No.
It's all about the leader. Let's describe who the leader is. Okay? We use a lot of personality assessments to do this. A lot of survey research. What's one of the problems with survey research sometimes with stuff like this? We mentioned this last time.
People know what you're asking or measuring.
People may know what you're asking or measuring, so they don't give honest answers. Are you going to inflate your self-perception? Oftentimes, yes. So that kind of goes into like one of the criticisms of it. But a good strength about trait theory is that it is appealing. How many of y'all like it? Like, you like figuring out, like, what is it that makes you tick? Right? Most of y'all, have you taken StrengthsFinder? What do y'all think StrengthsFinder is? Trait theory. That's why we don't talk about it in this class. It's because, one, you've already done it, but that's kind of where it falls in line. Okay? It's part of trait theory. Let's describe who you are. It's one of the oldest theories. We've been doing it 100 years, researching it, so we have lots of research to back up the things that we say in it. It highlights the leadership component, and we like that because as human beings, we like benchmarks, right? So we like to compare, right? I'll tell you, comparison is the thief of joy, but we do it anyway. And we always want to say, well, if this person has this and I want to be better, how can I be better? Well, trait theory is kind of one of those ways that, all right, we can have some things to look at. We can give ourselves some numbers and see where we are on the scale and know where to go from there. It's pretty cut and dry. What are some things y'all like about trait theory?
Whenever you learn, like, in strengths class, whenever you learn, like, your top 5 strengths, you can also, like, pull up, like, your weaknesses on that, and then you can grow on those. So, like, my top strength is composition, and even though that's good in some parts, it's also kind of bad, like, in relationships if you're not paying attention to what, like, you're competing with.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to, like, look at both sides. So looking at your traits is, I felt like it was beneficial for me.
It's a huge part of that self-awareness and self-regulation. I'd even say it's some of that social competency piece of emotional intelligence, right? Like, it helps us get there. Okay, so there's some good things about it. Some of the criticisms. Y'all, I know we have the Big Five that we've said, okay, these are 5 personality traits that as a whole people have, and emotional intelligence, but man, there is an endless list of personality traits. A lot of it has simply to do with the fact that, like, there are so many languages in the world and different ways to say things that, what is the difference between humility and what would be a synonym y'all would use for humility?
Humble.
Well, same thing, just a different, Meek. Okay? Meek and humble. One person says on a survey that they think a leader should be meek, and another person on a survey says they should be humble. Do those two things mean the same thing? To some, yeah. To others, you may say, there's a big difference between being meek and being humble. Let me tell you. So how in the world do we come up with this list to begin with when we can't even decide on what words mean sometimes, right? Another thing about it doesn't take into situational effects. So if I tell you that, all right, according to the big 5, to be an effective leader, you need to be high in openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, but low in neuroticism. Is that what's needed for every single situation every single person in the world's in? Why? Everything's different. There's so much else going on. Like, the world is so much more complex than that. We do not live in a bubble, right? So, big criticism is like, this is fine and good, but okay, so what? All right, and again, highly subjective. Doesn't really look at outcomes so much. So, like, when we say that being high in openness is highly related to someone being perceived as an effective leader, all we've done really is like asked someone to say, how effective is this person? But do we even know if they've accomplished goals? Like, what are we measuring as effective? Are we looking at outcomes? Not usually. Okay, it's still that idea of self-perception, and we're humans and there's some error there. Why would y'all say traits is not useful for training and development? So even though we say it helps with self-awareness, why would it not be helpful for training and development? What are we missing?
Because they don't change, like your personalities and traits don't change, so you can't just train someone to act like a certain way because it's not authentic.
Yeah. Did anybody walk away from here on Tuesday a little discouraged maybe about where you fell on the scale compared to some other people? And then for me to tell you, just as who you are, accept it. I don't know. I hate that. But I'm like, man, but I want to be better in that. There's got to be a way I can be better in that. Or, I realize I can't be very effective. So, I think I can work on those things. That's where trait theory is kind of hard. It's always a good place to start, but when it comes down to it, like, if people are coming for leadership training and development, they're wanting to walk away with like some tangible, I can do this differently. And trait theory really doesn't help so much with that. Any other criticisms y'all can think of? What did you not like about trait theory?
I guess for me it's like you're supposed to focus more on your strengths and your weaknesses to build better on your strengths, whereas like it's hard to like not work on your weaknesses and not try and make those better.
Yeah, I like that. Any other thoughts? Okay. So again, the book then, after it gives you all these strengths and criticisms of trait theory, it tells you some application for it. We're going to do that here in the last 10 minutes of class. I'd like for y'all to kind of sit. Let's do groups of 4 or 5. Everyone's going to get a copy of this. It's from your book. It's Case Study 2.3, Recruiting for the Bank. So some of y'all may have already read it as you read Chapter 2. But if not, I want y'all to read it pretty quickly as a group. It shouldn't take y'all too long. It's like 3 paragraphs. But there's 3 questions at the end of it. And I want your group to just quickly discuss your answers to those 3 questions. We'll do that in 5 minutes, and then we'll spend the last 5 minutes kind of debriefing those questions as a class. Yes, make sure your name is on your emotional intelligence test, and y'all can pass that forward, and Amy Grace will pick those up.
I did mine on the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Name on it? Yes. Perfect. Did you try it?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Katie sent her homework with me, and so I put her score on it.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'll grab this. Perfect. All right, so yeah, take 5 minutes and kind of read through this case as a group. If you haven't already kind of grouped up, please do that. 4 or 5 people to a group. I still keep forgetting that clock's 5 minutes fast. Because that's what I was like, oh man, we need to get to getting. Well, no, it's 6 o'clock, we're good. A little bit more time.
In the recruitment process, that always looks for certain. First, applicants need to have strong interpersonal skills. They need to be confident and they need to show full confidence. Next, because banking involves fiduciary responsibilities, applicants need to have proper ethics. Strong sense of the importance of confidentiality in addition to do the work in the bank. They need to have strong analytical and technical skills and experience in working with computers. Last, applicants need to exhibit a good work ethic and they need to show commitment and a willingness to do their job even in difficult circumstances. Pat is fairly certain that he has been selecting the right people.
I feel like it's like competency.
One thing that stuck out to me though, and I don't know why it did, that he, I think that he, I don't think it's like,
The only thing is we feel that all
yeah, that's what it was. Most of
those
him
we
come
didn't
from the
make it
city.
Right.
It says trying to visit your college things.
I was going to take that one. Here, I was going to take. Well, now you know the answer.
So I think that his approach and the traits
Rarely get those people you're hiring to give them, they would lie, probably.
I also like go to a different,
Take about 2 more minutes in your groups to discuss the questions. So what are y'all saying for number 2? About the retention.
The upper management.
Why?
I mean, obviously there's a problem if you're getting all these new recruits and the retention rate's still pretty low. Like, the people are still leaving. It's something other than who you're hiring, in my opinion. It'll be someone they're dealing with or something that they're being put into that they're not liking.
Like banking is such a competitive market as it is, so you have to look at like what management of other banks could be offering your workers, because like sometimes the grass is greener on the other side.
What's
So
the
you have to-
average retention
yeah, so you
rate
have
for
to-
banking as a whole? Is 25 actually below? So you're actually got, yeah, that's a good point.
And it's like some people that started in banking, they want to know that they can move up into that upper management. If your upper management's set, and if they see that they're never going to be there, there's no reason to stay.
I like that. So kind of like, what's the organizational structure? Do they make it in a way where...
Unless you're in the seat.
I guess what Arthur
Has every group discussed all three questions? Or at least everybody's read everything? All right. Let's kind of chat. I'm going to grab one of these for you real quick. Let's chat about our case study, all right? So, who wants to kind of give us a synopsis of what's going on at stake? What's happening?
Matt goes and recruits people, and he has a certain criteria of what he looks for. Upper management doesn't like how he's been hiring because the retention rate is
Okay. So Pat's our recruiter, and what you mentioned, he has traits that he's always been looking for when he recruits new people. What are some of those traits?
confident, poised, confidentiality, work ethic. And then they need to like have the skills to actually learn the things, which obviously.
Anything else that he's been looking for? All right.
Strong interpersonal skills. Resiliency. Initiative.
I don't think I'm spelling this right. I don't know. All right. What do y'all have after? Initiative. I can smell that one.
I'm pretty sure it's a lot easier to resiliency.
I have this rule. If anything's ever written in chalk or with a Mr. Sketch magic marker on a flip chart, it's spelled correctly. I think that's a good rule. Okay, we'll go with it. New rule for class. So, I mean, we've got a good list of traits here. So then the problem, going back to what Mason said, what was the problem?
His turnover rate is a little too high for this position, basically.
Huh?
The turnover rate is too high.
Okay. Turnover. So what was the rate, the retention rate? So 25% of new hires leave each year. Okay. So he's being asked to look at some different things. What are they wanting him to do? Kind of looking at number one.
Hiring criteria.
Huh?
They want him to reassess his hiring criteria.
Yeah. So they're saying, you know what, these things are all fine and good, but we're having a problem. People are leaving. You're not hiring the right folks, Matt or Pat. Get with your job, or you might be part of the next group leaving. Why? Do y'all think companies are concerned about this? Why? Why would this be a problem for a company to begin with? I think that's
It takes a lot of time and money to train new people.
a lot of time and money to train new people. So my husband works for a healthcare company. He is their director of training and compliance. They have over 3,000 employees nationwide. He has 9 trainers that work directly for him, and he travels every week. And one of the main things that he's doing is helping these trainers know how to train new people that come on the job. So they have a call center, because they're a healthcare company. They have a call center that's in Kentucky that I think at the call center alone has 300 employees. On average, they are hiring 3 new people every week. The trainer who works there is literally onboarding 3 new people every week. Do you want to know what the average length of time that they stay is?
3
3 to 6 months. Constant. So one, it's a money thing, it's a time thing. You've now got to hire a trainer who their only job is to stay there and do the same thing like every week, training over and over again. I mean, like, it just kind of is an exponential cost. If they could get people in those jobs who stayed, they'd save a lot of money, right? Because then that trainer who's bringing on 3 people every week could be doing other stuff, right? So it's kind of interesting that this is in the book because this is something my husband talks about all the time. So with that, question number 1. Based on ideas and what you know about trait approach, do you think Pat's looking for the right characteristics in the people he hires? Why?
I think he's doing a good job of balancing those social and personal competencies. I think if you went through list by list, you could pull them out and figure out which heading they fall under.
Mm-hmm.
And those are also the skills that companies in general, doesn't matter what company you're looking for, companies are looking for the exact same thing.
Transferable. That's a word y'all are going to hear a lot, and if you don't know what that means, it is so important. How do you have these skills that regardless of what job you go into, you can take with you and package? And so if that's not something you know how to communicate about yourself yet, let's start working on it because that's huge. People are looking for these transferable skills. Anything else specific related to trait theory that you're like, yeah, he's doing the right thing? Anybody remember, like, what's one of the traits that we said is kind of common across all trait theory that we see as effective? And I mean, it's listed here. What is it? Didn't we say there's a high correlation between someone's confidence? Yeah? What else?
Initiative.
Initiative? You might even, yeah, initiative definitely. So that determination factor. What would skills maybe represent? Competence? Knowledge? We said that leaders need to be intelligent or a little bit more intelligent. But obviously if they have some skills, right? So, I mean, if we just use trait theory, it looks like he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. Any of y'all disagree with that, though? Did anyone say, based on what you know, Pat's not looking? Are there any traits that you're like, or characteristics, you're like, he's totally not even thinking about these things, and that's why he sucks at his job? I shouldn't have said that. Gotta be something. Pat can't be perfect.
I don't know if this, like ties in or not, but like you could be looking for those, but not actually hire someone who has all of those skills. So he might not know, but he might be hiring someone that has more skills that he thinks is necessary, whereas it's not technically worth.
Man, he cares. Kind of going along those same lines, Lexi, like if someone comes in and they're uber confident, they're very poised, and they talk about having, I mean, in an interview, how do you know someone's work ethic? You hear them talk about it, and you're like, man, they've got it all. Could they get in the job and then you find out they're actually kind of low in this? Like, it kind of goes into that thing that like sometimes some of these other traits may overshadow others. Sometimes people use them as ways to compensate. You know, they oversell themselves. So that could be happening. So because he's just using this trait approach, he's not getting a real good idea of how does this person actually behave when he gets on the job, right? So there's kind of that issue there. So going into number 2 then, what, if it's not what he's using as his criteria, what are some other issues that could be happening that are causing this retention problem?
There could be upper management problems.
Yeah, upper management problems. What else?
They're just quite different jobs.
The type of job that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said something about a call center. I worked in a call center and I just love this job. Like
So we have other issues, upper management, the job itself, location.
And a lot of it, I mean, the piece that okay, hiring people directly out of college, and not very often is a kid's first job out of college, their forever job. Like, they're probably just there because.
Yeah. Sorry, we'll wrap up here. I know we're like right on time, but I want us to finish this conversation. Yeah, we'll be out in just a second. I'm sorry. So I do want to point out before, I know we're time, but I think this is going to be something key. So the group in the back was discussing that it could be the hierarchy of the company, right? And we haven't even touched on that kind of stuff. So the fact that maybe people get into these jobs and realize, I want to be in upper management, but this company it's not even set up in a way that's going to let me do it. So I'm going to go bounce over to my competitor. That could be an issue. This is that idea of context. So it's kind of showing the fact that trait theory, it doesn't really get us to what all's going on. It's only looking at the leader, the person themselves, not considering the context. Would anybody, let me have one person say, if you were Pat, how would you change your approach to recruiting? What is something you would do different to try to fix this retention rate problem? What did y'all talk about?
I would not pick all the same hires from the same college.
Ooh, I like that.
Because if they know each other, they're not going to be as competitive with each other and not want to I'm going to go farther than this person.
Okay. So diversify some. And maybe even in the types of traits that he's looking for, you don't want everybody. Like, imagine if every person, and I'm just saying, I mean, we all should be confident in ourselves, but if every person in this room was like super confident you go to school, y'all, I wouldn't even come teach. Right? Like, that's not fun. We want people to be different, and we need to mesh that all together. So I think that's a good place. Kind of mule on that a little bit. We'll talk about that some more on Tuesday. Big thing for next week. We're going to start getting into this idea of, okay, just looking at who the leader is isn't enough. We need to start looking at these pieces of context. We're going to talk about skill theory, so that's chapter 3 on Tuesday. And then we're going to start diving into some behavior theory, chapter 4. So 2 chapters. Please, please, please have chapter 3 read before Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Go Poach!